We have the lab here on the island to really, no pun intended, to nail down where that leather came from. And you have to remember that Oak Island is somewhat remote.
Miriam Amirault may have just blown the Oak Island mystery wide open. A violent Atlantic storm ripped open the shoreline and exposed something no one expected, an engineered fissure that lines up perfectly with the original money pit. And inside that fracture, a metallic artifact so old, so precise, and so symbol-rich that it could be the first real proof of the long-rumored $150 million treasure. Critics always said the Oak Island treasure was a myth, but this discovery doesn't look like a story. It looks like a map, and Miriam is about to follow it. Massive fissure changes history. Oak Island's known for its secrets, but nobody expected this to happen. A massive storm rolled in without warning and hammered the shoreline. It was a brutal Atlantic tempest that rearranged the entire island. When the sun came up, the team saw the damage. The causeway was covered in branches and kelp, but Marty Lagina stopped when he saw something strange. A strip of earth along the old stone path had peeled back like skin, showing raw ground no one had ever seen before. This soil wasn't just moved by water. It looked like it had been carved or pushed from below. Rick knew this was a big deal and called Miriam Amirault right away. She's the expert who can read the clues in the dirt. When she got there, she saw something odd, minerals staining all around the crack.
I think we're all quite excited that it could be the so-called flood tunnel booby trap system. Of course, we're going to investigate.
The soil had a deep red color with blue and black streaks. This didn't match the rest of the island. It looked like the storm had pulled back a curtain to show a hidden part of history. Miriam crouched down and started brushing away the gravel. She froze when she saw a metallic glint. It wasn't a modern piece of junk. It was clean and looked very old. She didn't pull it out yet, though. She had to map the area first. She put flags around the crack. Something had pushed this object to the surface after hundreds of years. Rick looked at the ground and knew this was part of an engineered system. Before we go further, if you love deep dive breakdowns like this, make sure you're subscribed to Bravo Tango. It's the only channel that tracks every clue, every crack in the ground, and every discovery the moment it happens. Now, back to the show. The team brought in the GPS scanners and started working. They did wide sweeps and cross-checks from every angle. The results made the whole crew go silent. The crack in the earth ran in a perfect straight line, matching the exact axis of the original money pit. It wasn't just close. It was laser precise. This meant the storm had accidentally shown a structural feature built long ago, but Miriam wasn't done yet. She scanned further west and found a second line pointing right at the western swamp. The two lines made a perfect mathematical angle. When they looked at the digital map, the lines met in a triangle. Right in the middle was a density anomaly. It was small but very dense. Rick stared at the screen. This wasn't a natural crack, it was a map. Someone had designed this layout on purpose, wanting it to be found by people smart enough to solve the puzzle. Many people think the swamp's just mud, but it holds the secret to the gold. Mathematical proof of treasure. The team went back to the crack to see what Miriam had found. She used small tools to clear the dirt around the metallic glint. It turned into a smooth, curved piece of bronze. It had no rust or damage like other things found on the island, suggesting it had been kept in a dry, sealed place for a long time. Then they saw the symbols. There were shapes carved into the metal with great detail, spirals and runes. One symbol made Miriam gasp, an 8-point star. It's a Templar navigation mark, the same one found on old stones in Portugal and on treasure lists from Templar trips across the ocean. Rick saw what this meant. If this was a Templar symbol, then the piece of bronze was very important. It was part of something much bigger. Miriam felt the edges of the fragment. The cut was clean and perfect. It wasn't a broken piece, it was a part of a machine or a container. The storm didn't just find trash. It showed a clue left by people with amazing engineering skills. The alignment with the money pit was perfect. The pattern pointed right to the swamp, and the density anomaly was right in the center of the triangle. Everything fit together like a puzzle. The team watched the sun hit the ancient bronze and felt like this was the start of something huge. It was a map, or a warning hidden under the island. Miriam knew she had to act fast. She didn't want to just talk about theories. She moved to a stone slab where the metal piece seemed to point, wanting to see if it was a key. When she put the bronze fragment on the stone, it fit perfectly into a small hole, like a key meeting a lock. She pressed it down and the stone moved. There was a faint shaking and dust started to fall. A seam in the rock opened up. Then the whole slab slid to the side with a loud scraping sound. It showed a dark hole underneath. There were no modern parts. It was ancient engineering working exactly how it's supposed to. A blast of cold, stale air came out of the hole, feeling heavy with time. The air had been trapped for hundreds of years. The temperature dropped and a mist formed. The chamber was finally breathing again. Finding the entrance was just the start, because what's inside is even better. Ancient knights left proof. The team lowered lights into the dark hole and were shocked by what they saw. The first layer wasn't dirt. It was lined with smooth timber beams. They were polished and covered in a shiny coating. Miriam touched the wood and knew what it was. Mediterranean pine resin. This material is from thousands of miles away and was used by old shipbuilders to keep water out of treasure chests. This resin shouldn't be on Oak Island. The wood wasn't just old, it had been imported and treated on purpose. The way it was built was too advanced for early settlers. The beams were all the same thickness and had a polished finish. This was the work of experts from the 13th century, the skills of people who had built great ships for secret groups in Europe. This was a protective layer made to last forever. Miriam looked closer and found a long iron pin in the wood. When they scanned it, the results were strange. It wasn't just iron, it had traces of silver in it. Silver makes iron weaker, so it wasn't for strength, it was a symbolic seal. There were also burn marks on the wood, but they weren't from a random fire. They were controlled heat patterns, a technique used to seal sacred vaults. The Templars used fire as a final step to lock their most valuable items. Rick looked at the silver pin and the resin. He knew this wasn't a place where someone had hidden things in a hurry. It was built with a plan and ceremony, made to protect something huge from being stolen or destroyed. He didn't say the word treasure, but everyone was thinking it. When they lifted the wood beams, they found a small gap and sent a tiny camera down. It passed the beams and showed a vertical shaft perfectly round and lined with stones stacked in an interlocking pattern. This was a medieval style that nobody in North America had known back then. It had been built by someone with massive resources and secrets. The camera went deeper and showed grooves in the walls. Miriam knew they were guide rails, made to keep heavy things from swinging when they're lowered. You don't build guide rails for no reason. You build them to move heavy treasure. Halfway down, the camera saw an iron ring in the wall the size of a fist. It was meant for ropes and pulleys to control the descent of heavy cargo. The team saw ritual fire marks, special resin, and expert stonework. This wasn't just a hole, it was a delivery system, a vertical vault, made to move wealth into the deep earth with perfect control. Nobody expects a machine to be buried under an island, but that's what this was. Forbidden wealth, finally seen. The camera reached the bottom of the shaft and everyone stopped breathing. The chamber wasn't empty. The light hit shapes that were very straight and uniform. At first, they looked like stone slabs, but when the focus got better, they saw the truth. These were bars, arranged in neat rows. Each bar was wrapped in old cloth that was falling apart. But there was a red symbol on the cloth, a red cross. It's the exact shape used by the Templars. The camera light hit the corner of a bar where the cloth was gone. The metal underneath was glowing. It wasn't bronze or iron, it was bright yellow. It was solid gold. Not dust or flakes, but real bars of gold. This was the first physical proof that a massive treasure had been moved to Oak Island. The camera zoomed in and Miriam saw Roman numerals and letters pressed into the metal while it was still soft. One mark said 12, matching the weighing systems used in Europe during the 1200s. This was medieval bookkeeping, the same style found in old Templar treasure lists. Rick didn't say a word. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a real treasure cache, stacked and sealed by experts. The money pit's always been the big mystery, but this room was older and more organized. The camera then showed a wooden plank on the floor, perfectly preserved. There was a message burned into the wood in medieval Portuguese. Miriam read it slowly. It said the gold was for the Brotherhood and mentioned a western vault. This meant this room wasn't the only one. There's a whole network of vaults across the island. The micro camera pushed through the thick silt of the horizontal shaft until it hit a hard, curved surface. When the water jets cleared away the grit, a copper sheet emerged, covered in fine scratches that resolved into a master plan. It was a complete aerial blueprint of Oak Island, etched with a level of precision that shouldn't have existed hundreds of years ago. The map identified every major landmark, but focused on 3 specific locations that had never been touched by an excavator. Beside these marks were complex geometric symbols. codes designed for the mechanical locks or pressure-sensitive doors of hidden vaults. Analyzing the lines that web between the symbols, Miriam realized the island's true nature. The infamous flood tunnels weren't just passive traps designed to destroy intruders. They were active components of a massive hydraulic machine. The Templars had engineered a gravity-fed system that moved water through the bedrock like blood through a circulatory system. This network allowed them to flood or drain specific chambers at will, using the weight of the Atlantic to secure the hoard. For generations, searchers had viewed the water as a frustrating accident or a crude booby trap, but the copper map revealed it was a sophisticated safeguard. The water was the engine. On the surface, Rick's deep-bore sensors began to pick up a consistent rhythmic vibration from the depths. It was a low-frequency hum, a mechanical heartbeat resonating through the stone. This was the sound of water being forced through narrow ancient pipes, proving the system was still operational after 7 centuries. The sensor data mapped a significant hollow space 40 feet down, precisely the dimensions needed to hold the legendary deposit. Every piece of the puzzle, the bronze fragments, the unique chemical resin, and the gold traces found in the spoils, now pointed to this single coordinate. The treasure hadn't been stolen or lost to the elements. It had been integrated into a living piece of medieval engineering. The map showed that the vaults were far larger than anyone had imagined, waiting behind doors that required the right sequence to open. The trail was no longer a mystery of history, but a matter of mechanical extraction. For the first time, the team wasn't just guessing. They knew exactly where the gold was. What do you think is waiting in that western vault after all these years? Could there be even more gold than we'd thought? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want updates the second the team gets inside that western vault, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Bravo Tango is following this trail until the very last chamber opens.